Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button if you guys are enjoying the content that we're throwing up. And make sure you guys hit the like button if you enjoy the video. And yeah, let's begin. All right, what's going on, guys? This is Rob, and we are back with part 2 of our Marvel Cosmic Hierarchy series. And I have no idea how this video is performing because I am not recording this the next day. I think I just finished recording the last one like 5 minutes ago, right? So it could be that these are doing horribly, and I'm just like, well, that sucks when I look at them later, and it could be that they're doing swimmingly, which is cool. But regardless, we're picking back up again with our series, and this time we're starting with number 15 on our list of the most powerful beings that exist in the entirety of the Marvel multiverse. And on number 15 here, I've got the Living Tribunal. Now, the Living Tribunal, he was a tough one to place, right? It was kind of tough to place him. Initially, I was kind of inclined to go with classic Living Tribunal, but the only time we ever really saw anything significant when it came to the classic Living Tribunal is we saw him like shut down the Infinity Gauntlet, which is a universal-wide source of power. So that's not really impressive when you're talking about the kind of things that you see multiversal characters doing, especially when we get further down the list and we start talking about how OP some of these guys are. But again, when you look at like the more modern version of the Living Tribunal, you still see some pretty, some relatively impressive things happening. But the reality is the Living Tribunal seems to be one of these characters in Marvel that just kind of skirts by based on the role he plays or the role that's been established for him, as opposed to the power you see him using when he is, involved in these various wars. We did see an instance where he held like 2 mega universes apart, right? Two mega verses, so like 2 multiverses apart, which I guess it's cool when you look at this in comparison to other things. But as we get further through the list, I think you're going to find that's not really all that impressive either. The Living Tribunal kind of exists as a judge of the multiverse, but just because he was designed to serve a certain role does not necessarily mean that there are individuals out there that are incapable of becoming more powerful than he is. And over the time that we've seen Marvel Comics existing and the various characters that have been introduced, a lot of folks are more powerful here. So this guy was a tough sell. It was kind of hard to figure out exactly where to put him, but I think this is a pretty good spot here at the number 15 location because what we have above him is Nightmare. Now, normally I would never have put Nightmare above the Living Tribunal, and I'm sure some of you guys are just like, what? I would have put Nightmare above the Living Tribunal, except that we recently saw Nightmare overpower the Living Tribunal. And that was during the Alex Ross story, where you essentially have Nightmare capturing Doctor Strange and then basically putting everybody in existence to sleep, and then feeding off the power that they basically emanate to his realm while they are asleep. And then you see him take out all the cosmic entities and Galactus and the Living Tribunal. That one feat alone is the reason why I have him above the Living Tribunal. If that hadn't happened, he wouldn't have even been on this list. It's the only reason why he's here. Now, it is a one-off, and that's kind of the funny thing, is if this was something like him assembling, like the Infinity Gauntlet, and then somehow boosting its powers in such a way to where it could never really happen again, then I would consider it a one-off, and I would wipe it away, and I would say, no. But when the ability for him to overpower the Living Tribunal and everybody else that we've seen on this list, when it all hails from the fact that he managed to get the world to fall asleep by manipulating Doctor Strange, that's not that outside the realm of possibility to occur a second time, or for somebody else to do something similar. And so I think there's a legitimate case to be made here that this is not just a one-off, it's not just a happenstance kind of thing, that it is a repeatable concept, and it could happen again, believably, right? It could happen again, and it could be like, okay, I could definitely see him doing that if he's able to ensnare the right kind of person and use them for his own ends. I could definitely see that taking place. And so because of that, I think this is a good spot to put him. Now, above him, and this one's going to be a little wonky, I'm putting the Black Winter, right? The Black Winter is the choice that I'm putting above Nightmare. And here's the reason why I'm putting this guy here. The Black Winter, as he was introduced in Donny Cates' Thor run, at least the first story arc of Donny Cates' Thor run, is he was given to us as a guy who was just kind of going through the multiverse and destroying and consuming entire universes the way that Galactus consumes worlds. Now, it basically means he has a role to play, or it seems like he has a role to play within the multiverse. The biggest problem that we have with this is there are too many unanswered questions. I'm going here just on sheer abilities, right? The fact that he was able to just consume entire universes and kind of destroy them. And there wasn't really anybody who could stand in his way. No cosmic entities, no nothing, right? It just showed up, consumed a universe, and then left. The sheer amount of power it takes to do that is pretty astronomical. We've never seen him face off against Nightmare or the Living Tribunal. So I'm really just kind of doing this and putting him here in relation to the fact that, when it comes to some of the stuff that we've seen the Living Tribunal destroy universes. We've seen Nightmare, presumably because he was able to defeat the Living Tribunal, he possesses that same power power as well. What makes the Black Winter so intriguing here is because of the fact that we don't know his origin. We don't know exactly where he comes from or why he exists the way that he does. It's simply just the Black Winter is there, right? And the Black Winter just does some things. The reality is, I think it'll play more of a role later on in Donny Cates' run. So this spot is really more tentative because it could be one of these things that if the Living Tribunal exists and the Living Tribunal's purpose is to judge the multiverse and to make sure there's no mystical imbalance or any kind of imbalance in terms of power, and you have the Black Winter traveling around the multiverse and then destroying it, if he's like a foreign body, so like the equivalent of you catching a cold, and he's not actually supposed to be doing that, the Living Tribunal would presumably step in. And so if that didn't happen, only one of two things can really be believed here. Either the Living Tribunal chose not to step in because that's the role the Black Winter plays, or the Living Tribunal was incapable of stepping in because there was nothing the Living Tribunal could have done. I'm erring on the second one here. Like, I'm just kind of going with the second possibility that there was nothing the Living Tribunal could do to stop the Black Winter and just kind of went through. But then if that's the case, that begs the question, how did Galactus kill it, right? So that's one of the wonky situations about a character like this, is the kind of things that we've seen him do makes him absurdly powerful, but the way in which he died is kind of silly at the same time, right? So it's one of those things where you can kind of go either way. But beyond the Black Winter, this is when things kind of get a little bit more to familiarity and some names you guys know, but also pretty crazy at the same time, right? So the next person to come after this, I'm going with God King Doom, right? God King Doom right here, number 12 on our list. I know it's kind of far down, it's pretty far down, and you would expect more out of God King Doom, but at this point, we're really just going on the kinds of things that we've seen them do. God King Doom, the funny thing about him is we didn't really see him do anything crazy impressive. The most impressive thing we saw him do actually happened off panel when he basically took the pieces of the multiverse and then brought them together into one single world. But if you're talking about a person that has the ability to manipulate a multiverse, that's not special, right? The Living Tribunal could do that if for some reason the multiverse was destroyed and he survived the experience. That's not unreasonable, right? So that's not a ridiculous display of power in my book. It's basically just salvaging what's left, right? Just summoning the bits of the multiverse. I mean, when you compare him to some universal concepts, sure. But to the other people on this list, it's not super impressive to me because they could all basically do the same thing. We saw him like destroy Thanos, but all he did was just punch him through the chest and then disintegrate him. One of the crazy things is that we actually saw God King Doom's power going on par with the power of the Infinity Gauntlet, if you guys remember that from Secret Wars in 2015. And so when you take this, the fact that he was kind of equal to the Infinity Gauntlet in power as it was presented, but then you also take into consideration the nature of God King Doom, then this is one of those arguments where we have to argue the circumstance that the display of power that we saw from God King Doom didn't necessitate him using the full totality of his power. And the reason why is because God King Doom was really more of a funnel that was giving him his abilities, right? In the form of the Molecule Man Owen Reese. That what you had out there is the next group on our list, which are the Beyonders, right? That the Beyonders, the energy that made them everything they were and all the power that they had just kind of coalesced and existed out there, you know, and the Molecule Man Owen Reese funneled that power to Dr. Doom, but he couldn't funnel the full totality of that power into Dr. Doom, otherwise it would kill him. And so assuming that Dr. Doom found some way to do that, he'd have the full totality of Beyonders, his abilities, and he'd be virtually unstoppable. But the reason why I'm also kind of putting him here is because seemingly anybody that can channel the power of the Beyonders is a person who's above the Living Tribunal quite easily, and especially Nightmare or Black Winter or anybody like that, because when the Beyonders came in, the Beyonders killed the Living Tribunal. They killed all the cosmic entities. They killed the Celestials. They killed Eternity. They killed Infinity. They killed all the cosmic entities across the whole multiverse. So these guys were wildly OP. They were hugely powerful. And when you're talking about a power on that scale, even having a fraction of it should be more than sufficient enough to destroy virtually any cosmic entity or being that exists out there, including the Living Tribunal. But again, we never really saw Dr. Doom use his power to that full totality. So this is one of those circumstances where he's in the number 12 spot, not so much because of what we saw him do, but because of the potential of what he could do. And so that's why we also have the Beyonders sitting at number 11, because with these guys, they were just on a whole new level of power, right? A level of power that we just hadn't really seen before. And this is when things are going to get kind of bonkers, because from this point going forward in the other videos that we're making, there really isn't a huge distinction of power between the Beyonders and anybody else. It's really more of how they use that power and how quickly they were able to do the kind of things they did, right? And the fact that the way they were depicted is they were effectively second to none. This will become particularly important when we get to a guy who named himself after the living embodiment of death. With that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoy this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.